Yes, I am Semakula Kiwanuka. My background, I was born in Kazi. As far as the Buganda system is concerned, I'm of the Lugave clan. I was educated in Namiryango, Makerere, London and Oxford. I've been around. I'm over 80 years. I've worked in academia. That's why I'm called a professor. I've worked in diplomacy. I'm a former ambassador, appointed by President Museveni to be ambassador of Uganda to the United Nations. I also opened the so-called Dubai embassy, but the headquarters are in Abu Dhabi, Emirates. I served a bit in the Buganda government when the kingdoms had just been restored. I've traveled the world, and almost half my life has been under Museveni. Therefore, I can speak with confidence. I've seen the system. I've seen where Uganda was and where it is today. I am familiar with the transformation of Uganda from 1900. The landmark there is the Uganda Agreement, which was signed between, actually it should be called the Buganda Agreement, because the signing was between the Kingdom of Buganda and the British. Nevertheless, it became a basis for British rule in Uganda itself. So for that reason, that agreement is very important. It's also important because it introduced a new system of land ownership. At that time, land theoretically belonged to the Kabaka. But under the agreement, individuals got pieces of land. And in a way, I think that was an introduction of what we may call private land ownership, which did not exist before. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Yeah.
Give us a brief history of what was then the way of trading in Uganda, for example.
What was the trading system at the time?
Yes, yes.
Well, the trading system, history tells us that this part of the world got into contact with the external world among the Arab traders around in the 1840s, 1850s. Then between then and 1900, more and more of them came, and that was the link between Uganda and the East Coast. Then the establishment of British rule itself linked Uganda to what we call the external world, because this was the European system. And then they introduced cash crops, such as cotton, which sort of linked the Uganda economic system to the global system as far as the British were concerned, because we grew cotton, we the people of Uganda, the peasants grew cotton, and the middlemen or the middle traders were the Indians. They ginned the cotton, and then the rest of the product was exported. Other cash crops were introduced. Coffee. I am myself a product of coffee, because and what happened, something which is not understood. When coffee was introduced, the growing of cotton in Uganda became less and less. People switched to coffee, and the growing of cotton was left the rest of the country. Yes. So these have been the major cash crops in the economy of Uganda itself. And coffee is still a major cash crop up to today. Cotton, I don't know how much is being grown today, but that's no longer regarded as a major cash crop for the economy of Uganda. Coffee is right in the center of our economy.
Okay, let's jump to what
is it so far so good?
Yes, so far so good. We are moving to before independence and slightly after independence, then we jump to takeover to Obote to Museveni around there. But let's go back to independence. Question.
What was the economy of Uganda like in 1962 at the sunset of colonialism?
The economy of Uganda at the time of independence was still agriculturally based. The commercial sector was small, and it was dominated by Indians. In fact, there is something which is, for some reason, people who teach economics in Makerere and the growth of Uganda, they skip the Kamia trade boycott. But that was not the beginning, because when you look at the demands of the Abataka, they demand two things. There is the political part, and they demand participation in the economy itself. That's the commercial bit. The riots of 1945 and 1949, among the demands of the Abataka, that we want to be exporters of our products, because the export side was dominated by the Indians and the British. We want to sell our product. We want to gain our cotton. Ugandans were not owning the factories. All that, we were producers, but the manufacturers were other people. So this becomes a major issue at the time in politics itself. And we come to the time of independence, still the participation within the economy itself was small. But the impact of the Kamia boycott was to remove the Indians within the trade in the rural areas.
Which year is this then?
We are talking about the 1950s. We are talking about the transition of the economy. When do Africans come into the Ugandan economy? The trading itself in the countryside was dominated by Indians. Everybody will tell you, people of our generation, including the president, there was a kaduka somewhere in the village where I grew up. And this was owned by Mr. Patel. We use the word Patel to illustrate the Indians. So that is a major transition. Secondly, the demand is we want to sell our products ourselves. Ugandans want to be exporters. But Mr. Patel is a middleman. That transition comes very much with independence. And there is a slow transformation of the ownership of the economy into the hands of Ugandans. Are we together?
Together, yes.
Okay.
Now, we've looked at the independence time, and let's throw some light on what was the pressure like to create the independence. Was it pressure within the locals, or pressure that was created by those who had gotten independence by then, but that influenced the people, that created that drive?
Okay. What we may call the independence movement does not begin in 1962. You go back to the between 1900 and 1920, the Bataka had started making demands. Demands, we want power in our hands, not independence. We want to participate in the economy. And the economic side provides the politics which took us to the political system, to the political demands and the political parties of independence. For example, we have the 1945 election called in babonabona. They had demands. The focus is on trade and ownership. Mwenda 1949, the demand is the same. Then we come to the British, the impact of those riots. The British began to to open up the system. They opened up the system, but it was a long struggle for Africans because they were not in the trade. They had to learn on the way. Then you can see the shift of cotton growing is less in Buganda. It spreads elsewhere. The Baganda move into commerce. Then we come to independence. Independence was very important. By that time, there was a level of industrialization. And Jinja, for example, was designated as the industrial capital of Uganda. Number of industries, textiles, and so on. And the government itself moves into ownership. Ugandans are being introduced to commerce and to industry. The cash crop economy is there, still there. People are in it in a very big way, especially coffee. The south, Buganda, moved into coffee. The rest of Uganda still grow cotton, but not on a very large scale, because now opportunities have opened up in commerce. So we come to independence quite naturally. We're in control of our economy. The new government gives direction to what to do. Trade moves into our hands, but on a very small scale. It's not until 1972 when Amin, as head of state, expels the Indians. But was not the one, because in 1969, Obote had shaken them a bit, and those Indians who were clever began to move out. But the major expulsion is 72 with Amin. And that's when, as he used to boast, the economy of Uganda reverts into the hands of Ugandans. Because where the Indians were, whether in the factories, whether in the shops, etc., Ugandans moved in. And there was learning on the job, because they were not traders, etc. The external links were not part of their culture. Now they learned on the jobs. The economy collapsed, but it revived over the years.
Can we talk about what basically brought the overthrow of the first government? What were the causes?
1971. No. The Kabaka. Oh, I see. Okay. A number of factors, mostly political and historical. I'm one of those who say that the Kabaka made a mistake by making an alliance with the politicians, because the moment you begin to mix the traditional institutions with the politics, you are going to clash with the politicians. And this is what happened. Sekabaka Mutesa was persuaded. There was a very big political movement in Uganda called the Kabaka alone, and it swept the country. And Obote was smart. He made an alliance with Kabaka Yeka that gave him a majority of members in parliament, and was able to go to independence. But he was smarter. He just wanted to use the system. When he was strong enough, discarded the Kabaka Yeka.
What were the conflicts that brought that separation?
The conflicts, partly personal, because Obote appointed Mutesa president. Then at the time of independence, there had been a long-standing question of the lost counties. The lost counties, in brackets, these were the counties of Buyaga and Bugangas. They were part of Bunyoro before the British came. Now, during the War of Kabalega, the Baganda assisted the British, and in the end, part of Bunyoro, those counties, were given to Buganda. But at the time of independence, the British were very smart. They didn't want to enter into that politics. So they put a clause in the independence agreement that the question will be settled by Ugandans, when Ugandans get their self-government and independence. And this was done by referendum. The referendum, I think, was in 3 counties: Buwekula, Bugangaizi, and Buyaga. Now, Buwekula was not part of the British so-called donation, because Buwekula had been conquered by Buganda during the 19th century. And this was clear because when the referendum was done, Buwekula voted to stay in Buganda. So that was a major cause of difference with Obote. But then you must understand Obote. Those were the beginning of dictatorships of one-party state everywhere. Obote had been smart enough to bring these people into the so-called alliance in order to let him get power. But in the end, he felt strong enough. He no longer needed the alliance itself. And hence the clash and the abolition of the kingdoms. There has been a view that Obote made a mistake in abolishing the kingdoms. He should have reformed them. Whether that would have been possible, I don't know. So we go into, from 66, we go into almost a one-party state. Obote becomes a dictator, and the division between Buganda and the rest of the central government is a major one. The Baganda remember Museveni, admire Museveni, and not only the Baganda, but even people who want to look at the politics of the country. Museveni was a reconciler. He restored the traditional institutions where people wanted them. And since the restoration of Buganda as a kingdom, the kingdom of Bunyoro, Nankole, etc., etc. So this was reconciliation. Because Museveni understood the causes of conflict within our politics. That was one of them.
Before we get there,
yeah,
I would like to cut, first of all.
Yes,
I
sir.
would